Well, hello and welcome to Boomer Banter, the podcast where we have real talk about aging well. And my name is Wendy Green, and I am your host. And in each episode of Boomer Banter, I try to focus on one of four topics: financial literacy, health, relationships, and purpose. And if you want to age well, you are in the right place. And today, our focus is going to be on relationships. So in 2023, the Surgeon General released an advisory highlighting the public health crisis of loneliness, isolation, and lack of connection in our country. These three factors, loneliness, isolation, lack of connection, impact our mental and our physical health and our longevity. The problem impacts both teens and young adults, as well as older people. And most of you know this, and you've worked to build your social connections. But how many of you are connected to young adults? If I asked you to host a dinner party and make a list of all the different age groups that you could invite, would you know who to invite? Besides your family, right? And besides your grandkids, who do you know that is younger than you or older than you that you could include in this dinner party? My guest today, Sky Bergman, just released a new book titled Lives Well Lived: Generations, Resilience, Positivity, and Purpose at Any Age. Sky is an accomplished award-winning photographer and filmmaker. She's a professor emeritus of photography and video at Cal Poly State University. And Sky's directorial debut, the documentary Lives Well Lived, was inspired by her grandmother, who, at the age of 103, traveled out to California for the opening of the film. Through some serendipitous events, Sky found her film was a tool to break down barriers between generations. And as the generations get to know each other, ageism, both ways, diminishes. Sky was a guest on our podcast. It's episode number 131 in February of 2023, where we first learned about the Lives Well Lived documentary. You can find it and stream it on most PBS stations and on Amazon. And it's fabulous if you haven't seen it. Even if you have seen it, go watch it again. It's that good. And be sure to listen to episode 131 to get all the backstory of that. And with that, let me bring Sky on. Hello, Sky.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you for that just lovely introduction. Wow, thank you.
Well, I am glad to have you with us today, Sky. It really is exciting where you've taken this. And so I want to understand, first of all, your new purpose and where you found that when you were visiting your grandmother on her 100th birthday in Florida, right?
Yeah, you've got that right. Well, again, thank you so much for having me on. And I would say that working on this film has completely transformed my life. I love that my grandmother has given me a new purpose in life, really. As you mentioned, when my grandmother was turning 100, I was looking at approaching 50. I'm now 58 and looking for positive role models of aging. And everything that was in the media was everything that we could do to avoid aging, like all the anti-aging creams that we could
Right.
use, things that we could make us look more youthful. And, the reality is I really wanted positive role models that were realistic of what I could do, because let's face it, the one thing we all have in common is that we age each and every day. So why not embrace it rather than dread it? And here in my own family, I had this amazing role model of my grandmother who, as you mentioned, was turning 100, still working out at the gym, hadn't started working out at the gym until she was 80. So she proved to me that it's never too late to start something new, even if it's working out at the gym.
So cool.
And I just thought, I'm going to film her when she's working out at the gym, because I know that there were many times when I didn't want to get out of bed to go work
Right.
out. And I would think of my grandmother at the gym, and that would be the motivation that I needed to get out of bed. And I filmed her, and thankfully I had a mic on her. And I said, Grandma, can you give me some words of wisdom? And she said things like, live life to the limits and be kind and learn something new every day. And I came back from that trip and I thought, I need to find other people out there that are not being showcased, that I can showcase, that are living life to the limits like my grandmother is. And that was a quest that I went on for 4 years, interviewing 40 people with a collective life experience of 3,000 years. And it has definitely resonated with a lot of people and struck a chord, and is still going strong, as you said, on PBS. We just got our contract renewed for another 4 years.
Yay.
Amazon and iTunes, and go grandma, because she's the inspiration for making that all happen.
Go grandma. And then you ended up having like, I don't know how many more grandmas and grandpas just from that 4-year experience of filming this. It's such an
Well,
amazing
yeah, I like to say that my grandmother left me the greatest legacy, which is 40 new grandparents, because
40.
really all the people in the film became like grandparents to me. I mean, what a gift that was, that I
Yeah.
have the wisdom and the friendship of all these amazing people. So I feel very, very fortunate.
Well, and I feel fortunate that you shared that with all of us through the Lives Well Lived documentary. So I'm curious though, you went from there looking for the role models with the older people, 70, 80, 90, and beyond.
Mhm.
How did that come down to, all right, now let's talk to the young people?
That's a really good question. So, I am fortunate enough, as you mentioned, I'm a professor emeritus. So, I taught at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in California for 30 years. And at the time that the film was released, I was still teaching. And I had a colleague of mine who teaches a class called The Psychology of Aging.
Hmm.
And one of her students happened to go see the film in the theater and came back to class and said, "Oh my God, Professor Bartlett, you have to see this film. This is everything that you're talking about in class." And she went to see the film and realized that the serendipity, as you mentioned, that we work at the same university, and we decided to get together. By the end of the week, we were having lunch and coming up with a plan of how we could connect generations, how we could push the idea of the film beyond just it being this film that could be shown in her class, but also make it the catalyst for young people wanting to connect with older people and wanting to know the stories and hear the stories of older adults in their lives and people that they didn't know. And I grew up in a household that was 4 generations. My great grandmother was still alive. We lived with my grandparents and my parents. All of us lived together. So I had 4
Wow.
generations. In some ways, I don't know that I took it for granted, but I think as a kid, I didn't realize how incredibly special that was. And as an educator, I know that most of my students in college had no contact with an older adult except like a professor or a parent or somebody within their own family. And, you mentioned at the beginning of this about if you were to have a dinner party, how many different generations could you possibly call on to have dinner with? And I
Right.
think we live in a very age segregated world at this moment. And I think that whatever we can do to bring generations together is super, super important. And so that was kind of how it all started, with this wonderful serendipitous moment of this fellow, teacher at my university who took an interest, and us getting together and saying, what could we do to make something out of this? And this, boy, has it taken off from there.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I mean, you're right. Age segregated. I don't know many people that grew up in a family like yours, 4 generations. It's very unusual, and more so now, I think, because, people just spread out all over the country, all over the world. So you had this idea, okay, let's do this, bring these generations together.
Mhm.
How do you even get started? What do you do?
Well, I was lucky enough, like I said, that I was working with a colleague and we were doing it within the context of a class. And so that definitely really helped, because this became the service learning component part of the class, for the psychology of aging class. And so we created a structure where we showed the film to both the students and the older adults. And then we gave the questions that I asked everyone, when I came up with like 20 something questions that I asked everyone in the film. And we gave the students and the older adults those questions as a starting point, because I think one of the hardest things when you're trying to get to know somebody is like, what questions do you ask? Or when you're going to interview somebody, what questions do you ask? How do you get that started beyond just a yes or a no question? How do you open the floodgates so that you can have
Mhm.
this intimate conversation in a very short period of time with somebody that you didn't know before? And so having that framework was that we provided for them was super important. I think that really helped. And then we would do a photo shoot kind of midway through where we'd bring the older adults and the students together, which was so much fun to see how they connected over that short period of time. And at the end of the quarter, the students were tasked with doing a PowerPoint presentation where they talked about what they learned, and the older adults were invited to get up and also speak about what they learned and what they found after working together for a quarter. And I'll tell you, there are so many friendships that have continued as a
Really?
result of that project. We've been doing it now for, I think, 8 or 9 years. When the pandemic hit, we paired up with Senior Planet, which is part of AARP, and did it virtually. And I will never forget, you talked about the loneliness epidemic, and it was especially hard during the pandemic. And there was one young student, young man, who came on and said this was the first new friend that he had made during the pandemic. And I
Oh,
thought, how amazing is that, that through this
mhm.
project,
Yeah,
he made a new friend who was an older adult, because I think the two groups of individuals that were the most affected were older adults and younger people during the pandemic. And so to
for
bring those
sure.
two groups together, it was magic. It really was magic.
Yeah. So one of the things that people seem to find difficult in conversation is listening,
Mhm.
right? So was there any training with the young adults or the older people on how to listen when you ask the question?
That's a good question. We did I do have a video that's up on my website, on the Take Action part of the Lives Will Live website, that we had the students watch, which was, and we had the older adults watch, which is all about how to do an interview, how
Mm,
to leave room and space for people to breathe. How also talks about asking questions that are more open-ended rather than yes or no questions, because we gave them those 20 questions as a starting point and hoped that they would go off on tangents from there, but really wanted to give them, like I said, a framework, and then where they went from there was up to them. So we did give them some guidelines of good best practices, I would say. And I think that that helped. I think that, it's a learning process. I certainly became a better interviewer the longer that I did it, and I'm sure you as well. Being a podcast interview, you learn as you. We have a motto at the university. It's learn by doing, and I felt like I was living that motto as I was doing this project. But yeah, I think that they had a bit of a framework to start with, which was very helpful.
that's great. So, and that's hopefully a lifelong lesson because they become better communicators that way. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so I'm curious, Sky, you mentioned in the book that the generations found things in common, which was surprising, right? Like I look at my generation and all of the stuff that we did and all the things, and now the kids, like they live in a completely different world with all this technology and everything. So do you have an idea of what some of the things in common are that they found?
Well, as you alluded to, one of the things that we heard over and over again from the students and the older adults was that at the end of the project, they felt like they had far more in common than their differences. And really, the biggest difference was their age. And I think that, we've lived maybe different experiences, but the emotions and the things that happen really resonate no matter what age we are. We all deal with issues of loneliness, of, a sense of purpose, a sense of resiliency. All of those things are the commonalities. It may take different forms, but I think there is that same underlying need as people, that we want to have that sense of purpose. We want to have that sense of support and community. All those things run across. Doesn't matter how old or young you are, you still have that. And I know, there's a lot of stereotypes about that older people have about younger people and vice versa. And I think that in working together, they get to learn about each other. And in doing that, I think it's like any other stereotype or ism. It's a lot more difficult to have a stereotype about a group of people if you have a friend from that other group. And I think that makes those isms, those stereotypes, disappear. I think that it really, you start thinking about it. Oh, well, I have somebody that I know that's in their 90s that's still using a cell phone or on the computer all the time, and they're told they could teach me. And so, you're right, that is a stereotype that we have, that older people are not technologically savvy. And there are some people that need some help, but for the most part, I have found that that is such a stereotype. I think that, and again, there's stereotypes in both directions. I want to be really clear
For
that
sure.
although when we think about ageism, we think about it directed at older adults, there are many times where there are ageist beliefs and stereotypes that are directed at young people as well. And so it's really important that when we work on these projects and any intergenerational work, it really takes into account that both generations are equally important, and that we need to get rid of the stereotypes in both directions, not one direction or the other, but in both directions.
Yes, I think that's a really important lesson to learn. And the only way it's learned is if you, like you said, people.
Mhm.
So outside of the classroom, now that's a very small group. Well, first, how did you find the older people that you brought into the classroom?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we did it in person, we worked with a couple of assisted living facilities, one that was for profit and one that was not for profit. And as I mentioned, we still work with Senior Planet, so we're doing that online, and that was volunteers. We put a call out, and people volunteered. And the wonderful thing about doing it online, although in person is lovely, but online, the students could work with people from literally all over the country, and that was really just wonderful for them, because some of the students were thinking about moving to different places, had never been out of
Mm.
California. So to, talk to somebody maybe in New York, or we work with people in New York and Colorado, in California, I mean, all over. And that was pretty remarkable. So that was all volunteer. And there are many other universities and high schools that are using, we call it like the Lives Well Lived intergenerational learning module, and there are lots of other places that are using the same platform. And PBS Learning Media, because the film's on PBS, I was able to work with PBS Learning Media, so educators that are grades 5 through 12 can actually do a similar project in their classroom, and it meets all the core standards, and it's completely free for those educators to use that. So they can go online, find that there's a couple of clips from the film that they can show, and then it meets all the core standards, so they can check off all the right boxes and easily plug it into a classroom. Because I think that's one of the keys, is you want to make it as easy for educators to use as possible, so that it's not a hindrance. It helps them rather than makes it more difficult in their classroom to do something. So
Yeah, well, that
yeah.
was going to be my next question. Like, how do you take it outside of the classroom, or at least at, Cal Poly, but you've spread it around. But, like Anne mentions here that she, in the Rotary Club, they have people from ages 25 to 80, so
Mhm.
they have an intergenerational thing going. There's a lot of organizations you mentioned in your book that
Yes,
also are focusing on intergen. So
absolutely.
how do you take this outside of the classroom? Is there a way even I could
Oh,
do something like this?
yeah, there's tons of organizations that are doing similar work to this. Sages and Seekers by run by Ellie Katz, is one of my favorites. We were both fellows through Co-Generate together, which is another fabulous organization. But they do a similar kind of thing that we're doing, but it can be online or in person. They don't, use the Lives Will Live film, but it's a very similar idea. And I think that all of the intergenerational projects. So in the book, the second half of the book is all about the lessons that I learned from all these amazing people around the globe that are doing intergenerational work. So I interviewed 40 people. I like the number 40. So I
You
interviewed
do
40
like
people
40.
again, who their organizations are doing incredible work, whether it's an intergenerational symphony or co-generational housing or something around climate change. I think the thing that makes them work is that there is an end goal that a common goal that everybody's working towards. And so whether it's, doing an oral history, or creating a symphony together, because when you create music, that is something that has to be done together, or coming around together around the idea of what can we do around climate change. So I think all of these people are just doing amazing work connecting generations, but there's something that everybody's working towards, whether you're a young person or an older person. You come together for a common goal, and I think that's super important.
I'm excited to share with you the news that you can sign up for the Great Global Giveaway from Rhodes Scholar and win one of 7 amazing trips. In celebration of their 50th year, they are offering any new subscriber to their newsletter a chance to win one of 7 trips for 2 people, including airfare from select cities. Just go to rhodescholar.org/heyboomer and you should get the pop-up that will allow you to enter your name and information to subscribe to the newsletter. If for some reason it doesn't show up, just go to the search bar, type in Great Global Giveaway, and sign up that way. Good luck. So I'm curious why, why do you think this is really caught on now? Why are so many people aware of the importance of intergenerational connection?
I think it's twofold. I think that there is something about our aging population, and I think that in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years, has been a lot more positivity around aging than there was. So I think that's being highlighted. I also think the pandemic has highlighted some of the negative things that are happening because we're so segregated and so separate. And I think you mentioned um, the Surgeon General had a study about loneliness, and actually smoking cigarettes is not as it's more it's I don't know how to
Loneliness
put
is
it in the
more
right way,
detrimental
but
to your health.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's more detrimental to your health to be lonely than smoking cigarettes. That's the way I
Yes,
wanted to
I
say it.
read that. That's
And, you know,
incredible.
it's amazing. So I think that people are finally recognizing how separate and segregated we are and how siloed we are. I mean, I am part of that silo in many ways because I teach at a university where everybody's from 18 to 24 pretty much. Because I used to teach at community college, which I loved because it was all different ages. But at the university, it's pretty much 18 to 24-year-olds with maybe some returning students. But for the
Mhm.
most part, it's that age group. So I keep getting older while my students stay the same age. And it's a very interesting phenomenon that happens. But I can clearly see where the students, for now, I think because we are so much on our devices and so we can be so isolated in more ways than we used to be maybe 20 years ago. I think it's exacerbated that even more. And I see a lot of students that are really dealing with severe depression and loneliness. And it doesn't take much to bring people out of their shell to make them feel like a part of something. And I think that that's important. And if it comes within the, context of a classroom, and that is helpful, where they are forced to, as part of the class, well, they could take another class, but they know when they get into this class that they are going to, part of what they're responsible for is to have this interaction with an older adult. And people actually seek out the class because they want to do
Mhm.
that. And that's such a delight. But I think that it's just these studies about loneliness have really contributed to trying to get the word out about bringing generations together. And then I think there's some really good organizations like CoGenerate, which used to be encore.org, that are highlighting the work that people are doing to bring generations together. And I think that when you have organizations like that that are really helping to show and highlight what is possible, it leaves the door open for other people to jump on the bandwagon and want to do the same thing or be inspired to do the same thing. So I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah.
that's kind of like the snowball effect, I think that's happening.
Yeah, and we've highlighted we had Ellie Katz on
Mhm.
from Sages and Seekers, we had Samuel Rubin on,
Oh, yeah, from
from,
Hollywood Climate Summit, yeah.
uh-huh, yep, so, I mean, I think there's the power in it, when you have the passion of the young people and the experience of the older people, it works so well together once you get past the, "You don't understand me, I don't understand you" kinda stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that, there we also need to move beyond the stereotypes. So, there is a stereotype that older adults are going to be the ones with wisdom and younger people are going to be the ones with the energy. And that is sometimes the case, but not always the case. So, there are many times when young people have amazing ideas and have a lot of wisdom. And there are many times when the older adults are the ones that are pulling it through with more energy than the younger people are. So, I think we need to move beyond those labels and stereotypes. And I think one of the things that's really been a disservice is to label generations by different names. So you fit into this category. Well, no person fits into any one particular category. I think when
Mhm.
we start doing that, it really it makes it more difficult, I think, for everyone when we start labeling people and generations. So
Yeah.
my hope is that we just start, thinking about people working together rather than what age we are.
Thank you for that reminder. So I'm curious, you said you had a list of 20 questions.
Mhm.
If we're coming together for a first meeting with somebody that we don't know, but we would like to build a relationship, whether it's in an organization or, a lot of volunteer opportunities like that.
Mhm.
Um, are there one or two of your favorites that kind of seem to kickstart a conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the questions that I asked was, "Tell me three fun or interesting facts about you that I wouldn't know otherwise." And that is, people love that because it's like maybe somebody from an organization or a job, but you may not know. Like, I used to play bassoon in high school. Okay, that's kind of a weird fun fact, and that could lead to a whole other discussion. And so I think one of the things that's really important is to ask more open-ended questions. Don't ask yes or no questions. That was something that I learned early on because otherwise that's what you will get is a yes or no answer.
Mhm.
I think that and ask the follow-up questions. I think that's also really important. So but the fun or interesting facts about you, boy, when I asked that question, that just opened up the floodgates of some really crazy stories that I would never have known otherwise. And I typically did research about everybody that before I went to interview them. So I knew a lot about the people that I was going to interview, and still there would be something that would be fun that would come up. I think so that would be kind of my favorite one. I think another one is, what's the best advice you ever got and did you take it? I
Ooh.
love hearing that one. Um, and then I think a third one is, what's been the most instrumental in shaping your life? What's been the most instrumental thing in shaping your life?
That's
Sometimes it's some
yeah.
weird event that happened, the serendipity of a moment. That's always those are I think my top 3.
I'm gonna capture those in the show notes because I think those are really helpful, for people that I mean, I could even ask my grandkids those kinds of questions.
Absolutely, and those questions are on our website. They're there because I realized at a certain point that I couldn't keep interviewing people or I would never get a film done, and so I have a place where people can actually share their stories, and I think that I really encourage people to do that because one of the questions that I did ask everyone was, "Do you have any regrets?" And the biggest regret that people had was not asking a question of somebody that had passed away. We think
Mm,
people are gonna be around forever, and they're not. And so, whether it's that you wanna write down your own story or you wanna ask somebody a question, don't wait to do it. And interestingly enough, that was the biggest regret that people had.
yeah, that makes sense. So, you found a new purpose.
Yeah.
This was, connecting with the older people, getting role models for yourself. Well, that has transformed some, and you're doing a lot of more intergenerational things. Can you tell me more about your new purpose and what that involves?
Well, I think that, no matter what I do, everything that moving forward is going to have some kind of an intergenerational twist. So the book where, the first half of it is the things that I learned about when I made the film from all these amazing people, like you talked about, positivity, resilience, sense of purpose. And then the second half were all these wonderful people that I met because I was inspired to find out more about what's happening in the world to connect generations. And I'm also, because working on a book was not enough, I'm working on two new films. One is called Mochisuki, which if you don't know what that is, it quite literally translates to making mochi. And it's mochi is white rice that is steamed and pounded until it's kind of like the consistency of bread dough, and then it's shaped into little mochi balls. And mochisuki is a Japanese tradition where they make mochi to bring in the new year as a sense of hope and resilience. And it's really, the film is really about the Japanese American experience as told through this mochi ceremony, which I love because one of the people in the Lives Will Live film invited me to a mochisuki, and I just fell in love with that. And I think
Ah,
and my brother is married to a Japanese woman, lives in Japan, and I have two Japanese American nephews. So I love being a little bit closer to their culture. I always say
yeah.
the more personal a project, the more universal it becomes. And I also think about my grandmother and being in the kitchen with her and the wisdom and love that she shared with me while we were cooking together. And I think everyone that's listening can think of something around food that brought their family together and that brought generations together. So I love this
Mhm.
idea of food bringing generations together. And then the other film that I'm working on is called The Primetime Band. And as I mentioned, I was a band geek. I played flute, clarinet, and bassoon.
Oh, all
And
of those. Wow.
yeah, I still play guitar and flute, not bassoon anymore. But I heard about this. The Primetime Band is a band down in Santa Barbara, and I heard about them through the Mochi film. Actually, the person who is the conductor for the Primetime Band reached out to me about Mochi, and then told me that he played bassoon as well and was the conductor of this group called the Primetime Band. And I said, "Wait a second, I love that name. Tell me more." And it's a group of people, mostly in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, who are maybe played an instrument in high school or junior high school and put their instruments away when they did their day jobs, and now are coming back to music later in life. And they're about 75 people in the band, and they rehearse every Tuesday night, and then they perform throughout Santa Barbara County. And it's wonderful because it does tie into Lives Well Lived in such a beautiful way, because there's so many things about the band that tie into having a sense of purpose, coming together to make music together, having a community because you have that band community, having that resilience. I mean, there's people in the band that have Parkinson's. There's one guy that plays trombone that can barely hold it because he's shaking so much, but he's still there every Tuesday playing his trombone. There's another woman who plays flute who can't hold her flute up horizontally anymore and figured out a way to have the headstock so she can play it vertically. I mean,
Oh
you
my
talk
gosh.
about the resilience of wanting to keep going. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And a number of these people are also part of a group called the Music Van. And I love, this is the intergenerational part. They go into third grade classrooms, quite literally with a van full of instruments, and introduce instruments to third graders, many of whom have never touched an instrument in their lives. And to see the joy on their faces when they get to play the trombone or the tuba or the flute, you can't imagine the joy that comes out of them. So I love this idea of people coming back to music later in life and then paying it forward to young people, and maybe getting them excited about music in a way that they would never, ever have explored or found out about otherwise.
2 exciting projects. Okay, so you write a book, you have 2 movies going. So are they out yet, or what's the schedule with those?
Yeah, that's a good question. My website, which is just skybergmanproductions.com, has every project that I'm working on and links to all of them. And the Mochi film, there is a 20-minute sneak preview that's going to come out. It's out now for people to see, but the full film, which is going to be an hour-long program, will be on PBS in May of 2025 for Asian American Pacific Islander Month.
Okay.
And the Primetime Band film is, we're still working on it. We do have a trailer, but we're still working on that one. That's a little farther away from being done. But I'm hoping to premiere it in February at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, because it's the 30th anniversary of the band. So I would love
Oh,
to
wow.
have that premiere and then have them play or perform after the film shows. So
So you
that's my big
finished all
goal.
the filming, now
Yes,
you're
and
in
finished all the
the
filming. Now we're editing. Yeah.
editing, post-production, all of
Yes,
that good
exact
stuff.
all the boring stuff, but all the stuff that has to get done.
All the stuff you have to get done. Wow. So I was thinking as you were describing the 3rd grade class trying out all those instruments, I'm like, "Whoa, that's a lot of dissonant sound coming out of that
But
3rd grade
it's
class."
wonderful
I'm
dissonance. I mean, you
excited,
go in
I
there
know.
and that energy is so infectious. I mean, it took me 6 months to get permission to do this because, of course, I'm going into elementary schools and getting model releases, but for 1 hour basically of filming, but it was worth all the effort to be able to go in there and do that. I mean, you can't imagine what joy, and you can actually see these students when they leave that they are changed
You're
after picking up
excited.
an instrument. They are
Yeah.
forever changed by having that experience.
Yeah, and 3rd grade is a perfect age
Ah,
to do
yeah.
that in, I know.
It's great.
They're still so open and excited, that's awesome.
Indeed.
Yeah, so, you're gonna take a little break after this? Are you gonna take a breath?
I am gonna take a breath. I'm taking a 3-month sabbatical, and, I'm gonna travel in Europe and leave my computer behind. I'll check emails, but I have promised not to do any work, so I'm gonna, just take some time off. Because I think, life is about balance, and that's one thing for sure that I learned from all the amazing people that I interviewed in the film, was really to have a moment of gratitude, to really live in the moment, and then also to have balance. And I think it's like anything else. If you do something too much for too long, it's not healthy. So I need to take a little break and a little breather, and I'll come back very refreshed and even more engaged. So
Yes, I'm
that is what I'm looking
sure.
forward to.
I'm sure. Well, Sky, your enthusiasm is fantastic. I love the book. I love the movie, and, yeah, I think it would be cool if we had a couple of snippets of the kids with the adults that they partnered with too in the classes, and hear what they say, like Sages and Seekers does that too, right? Where
Mhm.
the adults and the kids say something nice about each other.
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
have that. I post about that all the time. So if you look on my social media sites, I am always at least once a week, I'm posting something, a photo of the older adult and a student, and some word of wisdom that came out of their connection with each other.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, Sky. So if you could leave us with a couple of ideas or thoughts about the importance of these intergenerational connections, and maybe for those of us who are in an isolated kind of, what do you call it, siloed type of community, how do we step out of that?
Well, I think I can give you my own personal example because I was kind of in a rut in my 40s. I was department chair and just working way too hard, not having the balance in my life and not having a lot of friends. And I think that we sometimes get into those moments where we look up and we, oh my goodness, I have no friends. I mean, I have a few, but I'm working so hard that they're all related to work. And I wanted to make a change. And so I started having a women's dinner the first Monday of every month. And I would quite literally talk to people in the grocery store or on the street and say, hey, I know this is going to sound weird, but I do this thing, and all different ages. And I have continued that for like 12 years now. We took a little hiatus during the pandemic, but we still have it going on. And I have people from the ages of 20 to 90. And it's a very light lift for if you want to do something like this. I just open up my house. It's a big potluck dinner. There's no agenda. But what I found, at least for me, was that women want to get together and gather and to make the space for that to happen. And also for me to carve out the time one day a month that I was going to make this happen was so important. And it's just like everybody in town knows I've got almost 200 people on my email list for
Oh
it. Not
gosh.
everybody comes at any one time, but there can be as many as like 75 or 80 people
Oh
that
my
show up,
gosh.
and it just overflows to outside. And I tell everybody, bring a folding chair. And it's amazing what happens with that. So I think, if you want to make something happen, it doesn't have to be something massive. It can be something really, you can start small. Maybe start by talking to somebody of another generation while you're waiting in line, and you have no idea where friendships can come from. And really, if
Mhm.
you're open to it, I think if you're looking for something more structured and you're an older adult, look at places that you can volunteer, where you can do something that you are really engaged and excited about, and you can share that with a different generation. There are so many programs that are available that really allow for different generations to connect with each other. But it's just like friendships, it's work. You do have to look for it, and you do have to make it happen. It's not going to just happen to you. So you really have to make a conscious effort to make that happen. But if you do, it's amazing the results that happen and how much fuller and richer your life will be.
Yeah, and your book is an amazing resource, Lives Well Lived Generations, because you have all of the 40 organizations in the back
Yes.
there that pretty much touch on anything that someone might be interested in. I think there's another thing to think about too before I close, is that as an older adult, especially if you're living alone, it's good to know a few younger people that might be there in case of an emergency, and more easily able to get you somewhere or lift you up or whatever than maybe someone who's older than you. Just a thought.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that my grandmother always used to say, your friends become your family, because as we move so far apart from each other, we really do rely on our friends. And I think that was really what started this women's dinner for me. Was I thought, oh my God, if something happened to me, I don't have a good support group of people that I can
Mhm.
count on. And I need to build that. I need to like make a decision that this is something that's important enough for me to work on. And I agree, having all different ages is super important. Whether it's, as you mentioned, it's nice to have people that are younger just in case, but I think having people that are all different ages is so important. It really broadens your life and broadens your outlook on things, and it's just wonderful to share ideas with people of all different ages.
Yeah, I find it very interesting when I get together with younger people and older people. Yeah. Um, Let me share your website one more time. It's skybergmanproductions.com, and everything's there, right? Sky, the
Yes,
book, the movie links, the what's coming. Oh, there's so much.
everything.
Yeah.
It's all
Every
there.
So she is her own production studio now, skybergmanproductions.com, and that will also be in the show notes. Yeah. Thank you for all of that. Um, so I just wanted to say, if you liked this conversation, if you want to be part of the Boomer Banter Real Talk About Aging Well community, and you want to feel supported and encouraged, then just go to the heyboomer.biz homepage, and you can click on Connect with Us. And then you'll be kept up on all the information of who's going to be next guest and when any kind of activities we might be having. So that's a really great place to find out what's going on here. And also, if you are listening on the podcast, please like and review and let us know what you thought. Let us know some of your takeaways from this conversation. Both Sky and I would certainly appreciate that.
Indeed.
Yeah. So next week, we're starting a new month, which means a new topic. And so in August, we're going to be focused on the topic related to our health and how we can take actions to age well. And for many of us, the idea of aging in place or staying in our homes as we age is something that we really like. But in order to do that successfully, we have to consider our health and safety. And so next week, we're going to speak with Heather Evanston Brooks. She's a certified aging in place specialist. And Heather has many ideas about things we can do to our homes to make them safer and more accessible as we age. And we'll also talk about common things as well as some of the new home innovations. Oh my goodness, it's kind of amazing what you can put into your home. So they're making the idea of aging in place more of a reality. So tune in next week. Sky, thank you so much for
Oh,
being with us today.
thank you for having me. It's just been such a pleasure. I've loved this conversation. And thank you for everybody that left comments. And Wendy, thank you for having me. This has been really just a blast.
Thank you, Sky, for me too. So I look for the other movies. I'll be watching those.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So the Boomer Banter podcast is produced by me, Wendy Green, and the music that you heard at the beginning comes from Purple Planet Music. It's fun. All right. See you next week. Thanks, Sky.